Welcome to a different kind of bird's eye view today. I don't normally talk about sports, but there's been a lot going on, and I kind of wanted to talk about it. So, apparently, there was a change in the Pac 12, and the Pac 12 is no longer the Pac 12 because UCLA and USC decided that they were going to leave for the Big Ten. So, what does that mean? Well, a lot of people say it's a huge loss. I mean, the reality is UCLA and USC haven't exactly been hugely relevant in sports other than basketball. USC football has been not all that great. UCLA football has been poor. UCLA basketball has been pretty good, and USC basketball has had its shots, but really, okay. So they want to leave the Pac 12, which is supposedly one of the weaker conferences of the Big Five, and they want to go to the Big Ten. Well, okay. You can't win the Pac 12, but go ahead. Go over to the Big Ten, sure. And so what does that mean? Okay, well, what that means currently is we're back to the Pac-10. That's not the worst case scenario. It's not the worst thing to happen. It does hurt their TV revenue a little bit, but it's not like there aren't other schools in California that we're playing, right? Okay, so let's take a look at So here's a possible scenario, because the SEC is at like 20 schools, and the Big 12 or the Big 10, I think they want to get to 20 schools. I don't really know what they're at right now, but it really doesn't matter. But everybody's building these big super conferences. Okay, so here is the Big 10, right? Oklahoma and Texas left. They added BYU, Cincinnati, Central Florida, and Houston. And that gives them back to 12 schools. And so, there are the next ones that are maybe like the Pac 10 and falling out of the big power conference 5 talks, right? Even with their addition, sure, Cincinnati did a lot of great stuff. Houston's been consistently good. Baylor's been a lot better, and there's some schools that are doing better and coming up. But you go back to that talk of, okay, you have these big 18 to 20 school conferences in the SEC and the Big Ten, and what about everybody else? Well, the SEC has won national titles with the not having the super conferences and everything. So, but let's just is what's the Pac-12 going to do, and can they talk to the Big 12? Because let's look at this scenario real quick. Okay, you have the Pac-12 and now the Pac-10, and the Big 10 has 12 schools. That's not a great match when you when you have 10 in one and 12 in the other. But what if the Pac-12 added Fresno State and Boise State? And if you think about the travel stuff, is Fresno State's in California where the Pac-12 plays anyway, and Boise State's in Utah where you have Utah anyway, right? And then Colorado is not that far over there, so you're really not expanding your travel scenario all that much. Now, what if Boise State and Fresno State decide to join, and then the Big Ten and the Pac-12 decide that they want to make a super conference? And so now you have the Pacific Division and the Big Division, for the lack of a naming convention. I just went with their conference thing, and then you combine. Now you have 24 schools, which makes it the largest conference in all of college football or basketball, or the NCAA for that matter, right? And And between the two schools, you have your one division, you have a couple crossover games, but you don't really expand your travel scenario all that much because travel is a huge, expensive ordeal when you're talking about college sports. And where, you have BYU, that's in Utah. You have, you know, the Central Florida one becomes the farthest travel that you're doing, really. But you have Cincinnati, you have Iowa State, you have Baylor, Kansas State, Oklahoma State. Those are all fairly okay with the Pac-12 where it is. If you're only doing a couple crossover games, it's not like your UCLA and USC, which every single game you play, you now have major travel up to Big Ten country. Right, that's a huge amount of money that UCLA and USC will be paying out. With this scenario, which I think is a very good opportunity for both the Big 12 and the Pac-12, is to combine, and then you have these two divisions where you kind of keep your historical stuff going, but yet you have some crossover. You have a title game, and then the winner of that is in the playoffs, right? Because how could you keep them out? They have 24 school division. I mean, that's what the scenario is. But the other option is so the Pac-12 doesn't add Boise State or Fresno State, but they these two still combine, and then they put BYU in the Pac division, which gives each side 11 schools. And then they have a 22 school division, which is still the largest one in the NCAA. With that scenario, you still don't change your travel because that's kind of the biggest deal. Like, I know the Pac-12 hasn't expanded a lot, and part of that reason is because they're geographically isolated to the West Coast with Utah, Colorado, and then Arizona expanding out. But that travel gets to be significant when you start traveling way across the country and all the time. That's hard on players. It's hard on the financial aspects of these schools. So by creating this giant division, it benefits both sides, and you don't actually add that much travel costs in there, really, which I think is the best scenario for probably both conferences. Definitely the best scenario for the Pac-12 or the Pac-10 at this point. It gives the Big 12 a little more pull, but again, with you have the Big 10 becoming a super conference and you have the SEC becoming a super conference, these regular conference size I don't know that they're going to survive. So there is one more option in all of this, and that is the Pac-10 just does the Pac-10 thing and just doesn't add any schools and doesn't join a conference. Now, again, I talked about the SEC getting into the playoffs. Well, if Utah or Oregon goes undefeated, then how can you keep them out of the playoffs, right? I mean, Cincinnati made it in. So that's another scenario. The only problem with this scenario is both the Big 12 and the Pac-10 become minority options for TV contracts. And that's where a lot of money is to be made. The Big 10 adding USC and UCLA, some people are talking about $100 million for each school with their TV revenue and stuff. I don't know, maybe. But the Big 12, they can't sniff that. The Pac-10, no way they can sniff that. They've always been on the lower end because their games are so late. But if you expanded with the if you expanded to this huge thing, is you got games in every single time zone, right? You have the West Coast time zone, you have the Arizona time zone, you have the Midwest time zone, and then you have the Eastern time zone, and then you cover the whole range. And so you could have all these different TV slots, and I think this is probably the best scenario for both conferences. Not that they might want to do this, but at this point, I don't know that they really have a lot of choices on expansion, because if you think about it, the Big 12 made a great decision adding 4 schools to get back to the 12. But that landscape has changed. Now the conferences are 20, right? And the Pac-10 at this point, okay, add 2 schools or add 4 schools. The thing is there's not really any big name schools that you can add that really bring a lot to you. So adding Boise State and Fresno State is, travel wise, not that bad of a scenario, and they're both decent football schools. And then by combining both the Pac and the Big 12, this becomes a relevant conference in the super conference world that we currently live in. So yeah, let me know. I know this is different. I probably will cover some more sports when football starts, but probably from an Oregon perspective or the Pac conference perspective. We'll see how that goes. But what are your thoughts? What are your thoughts on what the Pac should do, what the Big Ten should do? Should they just maintain or should they combine? Let me know what you think. But for now, we are out of here. Much love, all.